Hey, Yasir, I'm super excited to have you join me for this episode of Coffee with Closers.
Happy to be here. Really glad to take this time to talk to you.
Most certainly. So I was kind of looking over your LinkedIn and your career history. You've had several entrepreneurial startups, and you worked at several other organizations. You even founded your own SaaS company. Now you're running a technology consulting and professional service firm with well over 300 employees and rapidly growing with very, very reputable companies as your customer base. So maybe for the audience that may not know of you, can you share a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur, how you got to where you are today?
Yeah. Um, Taza actually means fresh in several languages. The idea is to take a fresh approach on everything from the relationship and the outcomes that you're seeking for your customers. So the journey started with some less than stellar experiences with other vendors that
Hmm.
we had as I was building other ventures, and I realized that having a having that empathetic, collaborative, design first thinking approach and really focusing on the outcomes of the customer is really what's best for the long term business instead of trying to typically worry about billing hours and those kind of things. So it started there, and there was always the desire to build, right? I started
Hmm.
my journey as a somebody who came to the United States to do my PhD and thought of becoming a professor, but I realized I enjoyed building more than teaching. So
Hmm.
that was another impetus. And between these experiences and wanting to build something and help others, that's where that was the kernel of the idea. And then it kind of grew, and it has its own way to scale as
Hmm.
time goes, and you kind of take steps from one level of success to the next level of success, sort of thing. So it's
Yeah.
been a fun journey. So.
Building something pays a lot more than PhD and working at a university for sure. And what was the SaaS idea while you were in school, or you had that SaaS business while you were trying to study? Like when did you actually start that software company?
It was actually around the same time these two were. That was actually one of my. I didn't have customers, so that's where it started. So
Hmm.
we built a platform in the real estate space with my partner Dave Spooner there, and he and I saw the need for property management needs and things like that. It came through actually student housing problems, and then it evolved into a broader industry as we understood the market a little bit better. So we pivoted a little bit and learned along the way. It
Hmm.
has a very interesting journey for another day, but it grew, and right now it's doing really well. We're serving about 15,000 landlords, and my company actually does some of the dev work and support and engineering work for them, so they can focus on what they're good at serving the communities that use that platform. So.
So typically, when you build a SaaS company and you get it to a scale that you're talking about 15,000 landlords managing their properties on that platform, you don't necessarily want to go build a service company because service company is usually not the most sexiest. It's not the scalable. It's a lot more problem when you're dealing with people management and especially working with 300 people, remote organization with multiple offices across the globe. So why'd you decide, man, a SaaS company is not enough. I want to go have more headache. I want to manage more people.
No, I think what we're really seeking was the human impact, right? We build things to make other people's lives easier. Really, I think that was the more impetus, right? Even when uh, studying, the idea was to help others to make their life better in some meaningful way, and I think that's where the impetus is. This is great. It serves a specific community. We have phenomenal leaders there, from my partner to others, who can take care of that. But I could help more. I guess it just ended up. We learned how to build product teams. We learned a lot of different lessons along the way that could be applied to other industries and other customers. So that's where that pivot happened. So I am in two boats right now, but it has specifically with growing Taza, it has been a phenomenal journey. It is challenging. I think every company tries really hard to minimize human capital. I think we need without investing in human capital, we're heading towards a dystopian kind of future, right? So I think that the joy of seeing somebody grow from a fresh engineer to a thoughtful architect or a engineering leader has its own reward. So we try to create that environment in the company to see them flourish in that sense. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, grass is always greener on the other side. I mean, the problem with the SaaS companies, like you said, I mean, it probably took a very, very long time to really go to 15,000,
Yeah.
monthly paying customers, and to support that, it also going to require a lot of resources. But usually, the perception is if you're running a SaaS company that's much more sexy and profitable and enjoyable than running a service company, right? Because that's just kind of the perception. But oftentimes, like you said, if your mission as an organization is to serve people, and that also means serving the people within and also the people on the other end, right? Which is the customers. I guess you have a much more bigger mission than just make money and scale, right?
Right.
So I think,
I think that's, yeah. I think money is incidental. I keep telling
yeah,
people it's good. It's nothing wrong in it. But I think if you have a broader mission of trying to make lives better, anything that comes along is a bonus.
yeah. Yeah, I think if you do a great job, helping your internal stakeholders, which your employees, right, and your team members and your investors, obviously, but then that also reflects in how well you take care of your end customers. Because if you're take care of your internal people, they'll make sure that our end customers, are all well taken care of as well.
We
So
have the
obviously,
saying
mhm. Yeah, go ahead.
that I never, happy coders produce happy people produce better code. I've never seen unhappy people do a good job. So I
That's
think
true.
that's a guiding principle in a sense.
Definitely. So obviously, you've had some experience. You've kind of carried the CTO title at your previous company now, and you're the CEO and co-founder at this current company. Tell us a little bit about that entrepreneurial journey. Obviously, you went down to study, gotten a doctoral degree. So, what was that entrepreneurial journey like, especially kind of building a product business and now building the service company?
I think one of the most, people think it's a brilliant idea. I think it's a lot of perseverance.
Hmm.
You do obviously want to find an idea, and sometimes you find terrible ideas, but then if you pivot and understand the market, and it becomes a great idea. So in the product world, we live in the product market fit, right? And that's what we talk about digital transformation for other companies as well, is what's your product market fit? Who are your customers? What are you trying to do for them? So enterprises typically don't think like that. So bringing
Hmm.
that product mindset into an enterprise to help them do that digital transformation is one of the unique things that we do. But the journey started really with wanting to build something that we saw as a problem, either because there was market inefficiency in the case of the product, and then trying to say, how do we solve this? And then ideate and iterate on it till we found the right. We actually started as a listing platform like, Zillow.com, things like that, but
Hmm.
realized that keeping such a narrow focus wasn't, we're listening to customer pain points and then pivoted there. The journey is challenging. There's a lot of late nights, there's a lot of hard work, there's setbacks, there's there's everything that you can imagine that goes on with a startup, from coming back from near extinction to then getting funded and then growing and then getting to a point where it's starting to scale well.
Hmm.
We've gone through all of those. What we learn along the way is if you treat, especially in my case, in the product side, was working well with my partner and making sure we had empathetic towards each other as we grew the business, and faced challenges together as we built the team, making sure they stayed with us through the course of all the ups and downs, and they believed in our leadership and vision.
Hmm.
That those are the kind of things that came through a lot of learning. I mean, we made mistakes from having some short-sightedness in decision making to learning the implications of that, and then having experience as a good teacher along the way has been interesting. So came as a came here, and I don't know how to say this, but it's been phenomenal. I think this country is really built for entrepreneurs. No matter what people say about the U.S. has its flaws, don't get me wrong, but it's still a very entrepreneurial place, and I think it's where. If you have a good idea and you work hard, I still believe that people can make a significant impact in the vision that they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, the capitalism and really good entrepreneurial minded people really have made this country what it is. And I'm also an immigrant, came to this country, was able to create a business, and like you said, able to support a lot of families. When you look at the amount of families that you impact because of the business you built, you
Yeah,
realize, right? It's more than kind of the dollar amount, like you said, it sometimes, but it's a lot more about the lives that you're impacting because of
yeah,
that. And certainly, this country has afforded me all life opportunities that I would not have elsewhere in the world. Kind of from building that SaaS company, you must have learned a lot about what to do and what not to do when starting a company and how to go about, winning customers and serving them and all of that. What are some of those lessons from that startup tech startup company that you were able to implement or at least adapt when you started the service company? What were some of those key lessons?
I think the focus on outcomes is very important,
Mm-hmm.
right? So prioritization is equally important. You could be, I think people like this is very typical when you're a student, you're writing your dissertation, you're like, I need to rearrange my desk, I need to do this. You're basically procrastinating everything other than writing your dissertation. So the
Mm-hmm.
same thing when applied to business, you really need to focus on what's the most important thing and do that. If you don't, you lose valuable time, resources, and things. And especially as a startup, those are very, very limited. Focus on outcomes and prioritization, and then just get it done. I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs do go through a lot of market research, and then it leads to analysis paralysis and all of this. Sometimes you just need to be a little naive enough. Do your market research. Don't skip those steps, but have a little bit of naivety to take that leap of faith that this can work and there is a opportunity out there. So those are some of the things on the entrepreneurial side. But then on the people side, when you find the right kind of people who are culturally fit, are competent, have the commitment, and are have those core values which we espouse in our of ownership, curiosity, and humility. Hold on to them and invest in them, and share with them the success that you would have, whether it's through stocks or bonuses and other things. You will see, you can amplify the outcomes 10x. It's not 1 + 1 is 2. I really think it's 3 or 4, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a scaling aspect to this when you have that right investment. So, those are some of the things I think you take along, and all this is laid on the foundation of you need to have that, as a leader, a consistent framework of decision making. You can't be mercurial about things, and you need to be very thoughtful about how you work with people. So the baseline of that say-do ratio of what you're saying, you actually do. You don't promise, hey, I'll make you all millionaires, and you work for me for 10 years and then say nothing about that. So having that say-do ratio, being honest about what's possible, and sharing updates and outcomes with the team along the way, and really focusing on those prioritization from the execution side. Bringing all that together really in a meaningful way has been something of a learning and evolving journey in the last 8 to 10 years. So I'm
Yeah.
sure there
So
are good authors who write it better.
yeah, most certainly. And I think both of the companies, you've kind of carried that CTO function, so you're more of like a tech founder, right? With your background being in programming and computer science and engineering and all of those different things. And obviously that, a lot of people that are in that function typically kind of find another co-founder or somebody who's more on the people side, sales side, marketing side. Was that kind of the case for you in terms of knowing your core competencies and strength? You said, hey, these are my real skills where I can add the most value, and I need another half that's going to fill in the areas where I don't have the strength in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's critical to have that executive leadership team that complements each other, right? So
Mm-hmm.
tell me, why don't I go out to events and network? I'm like, I'm really introverted. It makes me
Mm-hmm.
it's very difficult for me to start the conversation, but once I do it, I get comfortable. But I have other people on the sales team, on the marketing team, who are a lot more extroverted and can put themselves out there with a lot more ease. Sometimes I really respect that. So
Mm-hmm.
having a executive leadership team or co-founders who are complementary to yourself is very important. For that, obviously, self-actualization is a journey in itself, right? What are you good at? What are you not? And what are the areas that you are deficient, and what are the areas you need to keep learning from is equally important. So I think very valid point. Always have sought that, who's the right set of, because that's what creates the executive leadership, and it's unique in each organization because different leaders bring in different kind of skill sets. So making sure they're complementary and fit together well is very important for the dynamic and the growth of the company, because they are ultimately the torchbearers for the organization.
Yeah, kind of like what you said earlier too, like having the humility to recognize your strengths and weaknesses, and then not necessarily beating yourself up, but finding somebody else who's actually going to complement weakness
Right.
that you have, right?
Right.
And bringing that extra expertise that you may not be able to bring to the table.
Yeah.
What you're saying actually reminds me of, I'm pretty sure you've at least heard at least one interview of Dharmesh Shah, co-founder of HubSpot.
Yes.
And he's kind of that same personality. He said in multiple interviews that I watched where he said he's an introvert as well. He's a programmer by trade. He sits in front of a computer, doesn't want to talk to anybody. And when he co-founded HubSpot, his one and only requirement for Brian Halligan was like, hey, I do not want any direct reports. I want no person that reports to me. I just want to be in my island sitting there and doing my coding. And now I think they're about 18 years into the company, well over 7,500 employees, almost 3 billion in revenue. He still have no direct report. A company that size is unbelievable, right? Because he said, I think it was a drain on his excellent, like coming to his zone of genius to really have people drain him. And he didn't want that. He recognized his weakness, but he still built a massive company.
Yeah.
But he found a co-founder who was very much a marketing and a sales driven machine, and he knew how to organize the team, build a sales organization that can go and sell and turn it into $1 billion company. Meanwhile, Dharmesh is sitting there and debugging code, and he found a lot more joy in it, right? So I think it's very, very important as a founder. You got to know your strengths and weaknesses and be humble enough to recognize that and actually bring along people that are going to take you, right? What do they say? Like, if you want to go further, go with people. If you want to go faster, go alone, right? But
Yeah.
if you're trying to go farther, you got to have some people that are going to come alongside to help you get there, which is very good that you've kind of found that co-founder as well. What are some biggest mistake you've made, whether that at the tech startup company or in the current company that you're trying to build and grow?
Many, many, because as you can imagine, I didn't come from a business background to build a business, but I think there have been a lot of good books along the way and mentors and coaches who've helped fill that. But I think one of the first mistakes you do is you don't, you carry people too far, right? So if they're not a good fit, and you know it in your, they call it the gut, but you know that they're not a culture fit or they're being too abrasive. They get the job done, but may leave too many bodies behind.
Mhm.
Because nobody quits companies; they quit their managers and bosses. Essentially, is what we've what what is like the common saying in the industry. But
Mhm.
I think being able to have the courage to be empathetic in that process and being able to say, hey, this is not a good fit, you're a great guy but or a gal, and there's a better place for you where you could thrive, was one that took me a while, right? And that's something that is very important to build team alignment, because otherwise you don't have the right cohesive team. I think that was a very hard learned lesson. I didn't know how to do it the first time around, but now it's gotten easier with time. And I think it's
Mhm.
actually good for both sides, because they end up not having to second guess themselves in the wrong environment, which is when you think of that, it makes it a lot easier. And then there have been always trade-offs. In the tech world, we call it tech debt. Like when you're building a startup first, you don't have the perfect system. So you build what we call tech debt. I think the same thing happens on the business side as you're trying to grow fast. We've been growing 30 to 50% a year for the last 6 years. So there is going to be an immense pressure on how to balance growth to quality to customer satisfaction. So there's always a trade-off, and this is a healthy tension between the three to keep that right balance. But there are times when you end up leaning in a certain direction too far. And we've learned the hard way that you need to pay attention to quality and customer satisfaction. And we had a couple of places where I think we fell short in the past. That has given us a lot of learning on how to be more thoughtful about that. We would rather not grow than to have our customers not be served well. So that was a hard lesson.
Mhm.
Now we have customers who've been with us for 7, 8 years, and many of them for 5+ years, because we do care and we try to evolve the relation to make sure that every interaction is a positive one. And in the software world, that's challenging, but that's our goal. So those are some of the
Yeah.
things that have kind of shaped.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Some of the things that you're talking about, almost every entrepreneur shares very, very similar story, right? Like you would think like you would learn by listening, but we all kind of have to go through our own version of it,
Version of
right? Like they all say, hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah.
But it's the hardest thing to do because you make a hire. A lot of times we as entrepreneurs have the best intention in mind. We're thinking like, oh, this person is going to work out. I have faith in this person. They're going to make it great. You give them time, you give them space, and then you just keep hoping for the best. And sometimes some people just never measure up to the expectation, and you do have to part ways. And it's a hard thing to do as an entrepreneur because you're this visionary minded person who always have very, optimistic view on the world and
Yeah.
people, and then you fail, and then you learn like that was a big mistake, and then you realize, man, I should have done this almost a year ago. It would have, because it may have affected the business and the impact, not just the business impact, but the morale of the organization also get affected. And then a lot of times just the bad behavior and habits that people built because of the other person's influence
Yes.
kind of stays with the organization for a lot longer as well, right? So that's
That's the
a,
grossness. Yeah.
so certainly that's a hard lesson, and we've learned that, and I'm sure every entrepreneur I've ever talked to, they've heard it. And then
And
the
the
other
funny
thing,
thing is, there are books written about it, and I've read all of them. Whether it's Built to Last, and there's so many other books that are really
Mhm.
good. Till you don't go through that
Yes,
metamorphosis yourself and experience it for yourself, it's very hard to. Some lessons cannot be acquired, or maybe I'm not smart
no,
enough. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, we all kind of have to have our own version of it, and then only it becomes more, solidified in our brains that this is what I got to do. Trust my gut and just take the action, right? Like that's like you said earlier too. Like even starting, you can analysis paralysis sit on it. It's the same thing with the hiring and firing. Sometimes
Yeah.
we're just gonna sit on the fence about it, and then months goes by, quarters go by, and then you're like, oh wow, we've lost opportunity. And then the other concept you mentioned is the importance of growth, balancing growth with the ability to support that growth. Because if you don't necessarily have the infrastructure to do it, oftentimes you're doing a disservice because you might be growing at the expense of poor customer experience,
Yeah.
which might come to haunt you later on because you can have a lot higher churn rate and all of those things that you now have to do damage control
Yeah.
almost, right? And trying to, you got so many fires going because you have so many unhappy customers, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, what do I do? Where do I start? That's also a very difficult decision to make because when you're growing, you feel like I just want to keep that growth going, and
Right.
that momentum is going to add to that. But a lot of times, pausing and putting hold on it, it's a little difficult to do. So how did you come to that conclusion? What were some of the actions you took?
I think one of my leaders was we've done our this analysis that you do. I forget what the test is, the disc test. So he's more on
Mm-hmm,
the thinking side. I have a balance between thinking and execution. And
mm-hmm,
he's like, we cannot grow for the sake of growth. And I said, yeah, I agree. But then when you dig deeper, and then you realize, okay, here's where we need to make a choice and say no to certain customers. Or it's very hard to say no, especially during COVID.
mm-hmm,
We thought we would actually shrink, but the people wanting to digitize their solutions exponentially went up after people realized they had to still work somehow remotely. And we had to end up saying no to so much business, which it was
mm-hmm,
hard to do. But
mm-hmm,
at the end of the day, I think that was the right decision. We kept our employees happy. They were themselves going through this whole isolation and issues because of COVID, and a lot of them had people they lost to COVID. And if we had said yes to more business, it would have made their lives miserable, and it would have, you know, I think even though hindsight is 2020, I think that
mm-hmm,
balance really helped. The fact that we kept that focus on quality actually ended up being a positive thing for us. So saying no to business is one of the hardest decisions, especially good business. You have a good client willing
mm-hmm,
to pay well. It's very hard to say no.
mm-hmm,
I think that came through a couple of incidents where we're like, do we have capacity to do this right? Do we have the right people who can align to this project? And if we don't,
mm-hmm,
we can't just double up somebody's work, or those things don't work in the long term. So those were learnings that we had early on when we were at that fast growth rate. So we have tried to slow down consciously a little bit, but we also ended up building better programs so we can continue scaling. It's not once you put the processes in place and the training in place and all of those things. As you said, people management is is a different beast. So
Yeah, and also capacity management too, right? Because you're trying to build a service business, so it's not like, if you have a SaaS, it's a turning on a license is a lot easier. When you actually have a commitment to a company that I'm going to deliver on a certain date, your beta, alpha, or whatever version of that product, you kind of have to keep that word, right? Otherwise, you're going to have a bunch of unhappy customers coming after you.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily want that. But obviously, you figured out how to grow. And in the last 14 or so years, you said you've been growing 30-40% year over year. So that's very, very healthy and very successful growth. What has worked really well, apart from the fact that you're doing a great job in serving the customer and producing a good product? What are some other tactics and strategies you put in place to grow?
I think building the foundational is really building good relationships with existing customers who then refer you to other customers. Then the second is
Mm-hmm.
what I learned from the SaaS company is really we love because once you build one product, you know how to build other products better. So we've been partners to other SaaS companies and startups where we have ended up being their engineering teams, and we think collaboratively with them like founders because I have had that mentality and I've pushed that down to our each team. I keep telling them, you guys are mini CTOs or mini CEOs of your own engineering group. So creating a distributed ownership mindset and then working closely with some of these SaaS companies has also helped help the growth. So and growing beyond. So one aspect is doing this, which we get better at every year, and the second aspect is at some point you need to put together. You need to get your act together for the sales, marketing, engineering functions to be able to build what we call a commercial sales function. Right? It can't just be founder-led sales or a couple of key people. We have built a system in place that does marketing, sales. We have a proper discipline, pipeline, funnels, people managing those things. Those are the things
Mm-hmm.
that really help. Really look at various KPIs on the services business itself to make sure it is run. Even though uh, we are people focused, we still have data and discipline to make sure we're running the business in a forward thinking manner.
A head for all of those core functions you mentioned, the sales, the marketing, and all of those. And how many direct reports do you have?
I just have my six. I have six direct reports from
Mm-hmm.
my COO to my chief growth officer to my chief marketing officer. I have a CTO now who I've been. It's beautiful to see him grow from a senior engineer. Now he's taken on the CTO role, and I have
Mm-hmm.
a chief delivery officer. Those are the 6 7 people that report to me, including a fractional CFO. But uh, each of them then dwell into different areas. For example, the engineering has different practice functions and things like that we focus on different technologies, whether it's the new emerging field of AI. So we have a team that's just focused on how to apply AI for different use cases, and we have hackathons and competitions and X prizes within the company to keep that entrepreneurial spread going, and
Mm-hmm.
then also applying those. So each function we start with a leader,
Mm-hmm.
and either it's a practice lead or a director, and then they report to their corresponding departments. So it's been a